Interestingly, budget 2023, this special tax on luxury item, of course, plus this extra tax rate for the T20, which was being announced. So what's your thought about this luxury item taxes, in approach in handling this social inequality while growing the nation in general?
Now, you see, we always argue that the government shouldn't incur that large budget deficit. The government should not borrow that much, which means that the government should have a way to tax you more, to have more tax revenue, right? So now we already know that of course the best way to tax people is to make it broad-based so that the tax burden can be lower. Now, because of this and that reason, and then we don't have that kind of broad-based tax coming back, at least not for the time being. So therefore, you must find some way to tax, to have a new source of tax revenue. Now, you know that the principle of taxation from economic point of view is that you should minimize the incentive distortion of tax. Meaning every time when someone is taxed, then their behavior will be distorted. Like, for example, you have this income tax. We know that our work incentive will be distorted because if we work harder, earn more, then which means we're going to pay more. So you're going to have some way of another that you're trying to evade the tax, reduce the tax, or even you underreport your taxable income. So it distorts behavior. Now, the best tax system is if we can minimize the tax distortion, and then we impose those taxes that didn't distort behavior. So upon that principle, of course, we always argue broad-based tax, GST, is much better than income tax because consumption tax doesn't really distort people's behavior, right? Now, so upon that similar principle, it is why we have this luxury goods tax. Because luxury goods is in econs, we say it is not sensitive to prices. People buy luxury items not because of you have any discounting prices, but because of the brand loyalty, because of the status. When you can spend 50,000 buying a bag, you don't care about that 6-5% of extra price increase because of tax, right? So in that sense, even though I charge tax on those luxury items, it will not change that behavior, and therefore that is a good source of tax. So from that perspective, therefore, I would say that why not? I mean, it's one of the way to tax the item as well. You can also treat it as a part of the GST, but this is just a GST that focuses on the luxury item, rather than a broad-based GST. So, and as you mentioned earlier, will people move or buy from other countries when you have that tax? Like I said, I don't really think that will happen because, like I said, when you can really spend tens of thousands without hesitation buying a bag, I don't think you would care having another 5% tax being imposed on that price. And of course, I will also think that they are not price sensitive. They're not price sensitive. I don't think that I believe that when we have details coming out, I believe that only those really pricey items will be considered luxury goods. A watch with, let's say, 1,000, 2,000, I don't believe that it will be considered as a luxury item. But if you talk about 10, 100,000 kind of watch, then it's a completely different story. Luxury item is really like a pawn. You will know it when you watch it, whether it's a luxury or it is not. So so in that sense, I don't have too much negative perception or idea about it.
You are right. When I look at it, to me, I think this is a custom matters. It is something like another expanded scope of the SST. It's a consumption tax. To me, it's a consumption tax. It's just that instead of rolling out GST in a wide and across the base, it is an expansion of of the SST. You know, to me, it's like, I think they will be implementing it that way. It's just, it will be interesting to see how they class that particular categories. You know, it's just like when they import products, you know, how they class that coding. It will make tax, those people who manage this sector of tax, those agents who's handling it will actually find it a lot more difficult. Maybe through import taxes or whatever. So when you pay for it, you have to pay higher, whatever it is, I guess. So yeah, so that is actually one thing. I guess we can't avoid it. Yeah. So now, interestingly, after the budget announcement, then there are additional announcement, and one of the things that was actually announced was this interesting new thing called voluntary disclosure or amnesty program, right? So now, Malaysia is not new to voluntary disclosure or amnesty program. In fact, 2019 budgets, which was actually announced in 2018, had that, right? That was the first time we have this voluntary disclosure program, and it was a very successful one, Doctor. It was very successful. Malaysia collected 8 billion. They hope to collect more, but they collected 8 billion from the program. And last year, 2022, Customs Diraja Malaysia also spearhead another round of voluntary disclosure program that was under the customs. And I don't have the numbers for that particular collections, but generally it's also a windfall. It was also a windfall collection that they actually received. Now, what is your view on government keep having this voluntary disclosure program as opposed to taxpayers should have already been paying their rightful tax, you know? And why they're encouraging it? Is it because there is statistic that's already shown that Malaysia are putting money somewhere else, you know, pillows that is in Singapore, or pillows that is in other countries and not bringing it back? Is it healthy? I mean, is this voluntary disclosure program kind of environment, is it healthy for the growth of the economy, as well as in encouraging or bringing back of money back into Malaysia? What's your thought on voluntary disclosure program?
You know, when you say that successful, that in a way indicates that how clever the companies were in minimizing their tax obligation, you know, and yeah, and so, okay, now jokes aside, you can imagine why we need that kind of voluntary this scheme, because the government need tax revenue. You know, when you cannot really implement a real tax reform, so we can only here and there trying to fill up the hole in the tax revenue. So therefore, having this voluntary scheme is part of them, right? And why it was started in 2018, because that was the year when GST was abolished and the government needs tax revenue, and it worked. So it is going to work most likely in the future. So in that sense, therefore, I can imagine, I can understand the rationale why this comebacks in this budget. Now, is this a long-term solution? No, certainly no. Right? So because at the end, how many times you can ask the firms to voluntarily report those underreported income? Because if they have done in the past 2 years, that it will come to the end, you know, that everyone comes clean. No one has any underreported income anymore. So you know that it will come to due soon. So no, I don't think it's a long-term solution. And like what we have discussed before our program started, we will mention that to what extent it was be successful depends on the credibility of the agency. When they say that it is a one-time off and no any aftermath consequence, so they have to keep their promise. Otherwise, you know that it will have bad consequence on the lembagas reputation as well. So yeah, and would it help?
Normally, because voluntary normally will have to promise that you don't come and bug me after that, you know, kind of thing.
Yes. It works. At least it shows that at least they, to some extent, they kept their promise. Yeah.
But
So
what about a situation of, okay, I guess the amnesty is also to encourage the money coming back to the country. Let the money come into the country and maybe grow the economy together. But do you think is that the solution of extracting funds, in this case Malaysians or Malaysian taxpayers' money, to come back?